Hello and welcome. What the fuck? We'll just restart that. Blip, 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 blip. Here we go. Hello and welcome to Three's a Crime, a true crime podcast. I'm Tori.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Lindsay.
And that's our intro.
Here we are professional podcasters.
We're podcasters, bitches. Emily, introduce us to our special guest.
I met this super sexy dude walking down the street, and I was like,
Sing, do what did he?
diddy done, diddy do.
Oh my god.
Marriage is fun. So, husband is here.
Hello.
Husband's name is Michael.
Emily's husband.
My husband.
Because there are two.
And I do feel like I want to say that the first time I met Michael, I told him that his voice sounded like he should be a movie announcer because it's so low. And now it's just all coming full circle. But I think that that's funny that I told you that, and now here you are with a microphone.
Now here we are.
Now here
You
we
do have a
are.
very TV radio voice.
Yeah. So enjoy the sultry sounds of my gravelly voice over the next 2.5 or so hours.
There's gonna be some ladies who are gonna be like,
Yeah,
yeah.
Get some fans.
Some car accidents might happen.
Tell us about yourself, sir.
I'm just a guy in the world.
Oh no.
You're just a small town girl in a small town. No, what is the term?
Yep. Nope. I
Living in a
Nailed it the first time. Good job.
Oh, small town girl in a small town world. Is that right? Continue. Sorry.
He's a city boy, born and raised in
Yeah.
South Detroit.
Tell us about yourself.
What do you do for a living? What is
Who
your
are you?
hobbies?
What's your name?
I am husband. I know stuff.
Okay. Your name is?
Husband. I know stuff.
Emily's
His name is
face.
Husband I Know Stuff.
My-
Husband I Know Stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm Michael, Emily's husband. I don't have social media, so don't look for me. You can follow me at nothing.
As soon as I found you on social media and stalked the fuck out of you, you deleted it.
Yeah, we met at a party.
That sort of makes sense.
Yeah, and I was thinking about deleting Facebook, which was the only thing I had at the time. And then I didn't, and then she found me, and then I did.
I met you at a barbecue. I didn't just find you on the internet.
No.
I met you in person at a barbecue. He goes, she found me, and so I deleted it so no one else could
So
find
who
me.
was the mutual person that brought you two together?
Dino and Phil.
Our friend, I was friends with Phil, and he was friends with Dino, and Dino and Phil worked together.
Oh, Dino and Phil.
Or not worked together,
Those
lived
names
together.
Are great.
I know.
They are great.
Dino
Like I
and
feel
Phil.
like that's like it should be a T-shirt for a TV show.
Or they're in
Yeah,
a fucking
know?
band.
He was the only one that would pay attention to me and like had conversations with me at this barbecue, and I had left and I had actually come back, which is funny because I didn't actually see you there the first time because there was a bunch of people there, but then when I came back the second time there was only like 8 people, and someone went and had sex in a bedroom, so all of us moved out to
There
the
were a few people
garage.
having sex with a few people.
So all of us who were not having sex with each other decided to go in the garage. And I thought you were cute. Oh yeah, and you offered me beer, and I hated the taste of it, so I
Yeah.
left it at the bar or at the thing. He was like, "You're not drinking beer," and he brought me one, and I tasted it, and I was like, and so I just
Yeah.
left it somewhere, and then he found me like 30 seconds later and was like, "Where's your beer?" And I was like, "Oh, what?" And then I found you on social media,
Hmm.
and then
So
here we
you
are.
made the first move?
I made literally every single move.
Oh, yeah.
Except the marriage proposal one. All the other ones.
Which you basically almost missed.
Yeah. Maybe because that's why it was a really good build up. It was pretty great. It's fun time. So now you don't have social media, so no one can follow you.
Right.
You can follow me on social media where all of his friends follow me and then message me to ask him questions or tag me in posts to show you.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
So, ladies, what do you know about the Watergate scandal?
I know nothing.
I know that Nixon resigned because of it.
I know what I know from Forrest Gump.
Oh yeah,
From
same.
that whole thing.
That's my knowledge.
We know that
extends.
there was a hotel. The Watergate was a
Didn't know
hotel.
that.
Okay, the Watergate was a hotel.
Okay, now I know.
And
It's a whole hotel complex in DC.
yeah, and I think the DNC headquarters
Mhm.
were there, and then there was a break-in and a very big scandal. And I know there was something about tapes. Nixon was on tape, but I feel like that's the information you're gonna.
Tell us.
It is.
Give us
It is.
today.
We're going to get into all that.
Ready.
If you're anything like me, the Watergate scandal was that thing ex-President Richard Nixon did that led to his impeachment. Thanks to the abysmal state of America's history curriculum, I learned everything I know about the issue from Forrest Gump, and the fact that it is now common to add the "gate" suffix to pretty much any major
Any
social
scandal.
issue.
Oh my god, that's true. Never fucking realized
Gamergate,
that.
Pizzagate, Gatesgate is becoming a thing. Let's
Oh,
stop that
Gatesgate,
already.
yeah.
Oh boy. Now, given that this is a true crime podcast, I'm going to go out of my way to try and keep as much politics out of this as I can, because this is not the platform for this. But it's inevitable in some cases.
Yeah,
I mean, we're
right.
talking about an ex-president who is famous for basically one thing.
Turkey dick.
With that being said, the Watergate scandal is much crazier than anything really anyone actually knows, especially in our age group in this day and age,
That's true.
because we don't know, we're not taught about it. We're just, it's a
Right.
thing. Nixon was impeached. I found out researching this that he actually resigned. He wasn't actually impeached.
You know, you think about things that are a national embarrassment, we either don't learn about, like where they wipe it out entirely, or it's like just super glossed over.
Yeah.
Well, and Nixon was tied up in a lot of things that we don't want to teach in history,
Oh,
which I
right.
get into in a little bit also.
Sure.
But the point of what I wanted to get into with this was that Richard Nixon was a much more complicated person. He wasn't this cartoonishly evil figure that the media, when they do bring him up, portray him as.
Yeah.
He came down on the right side of history on a lot of things, but he also irrevocably fucked up a lot of countries in ways that we're still dealing with today. Most of South America, in fact. So Richard Milhouse Nixon was born January 9th, 1913 to Hannah and Francis Nixon. He had 4 brothers, Harold, Donald, Arthur, and Edward, who were raised in the Quaker faith, which I found out was a sect of Protestantism that's been around since the 17th century.
I was dedicated to Quaker.
Oh,
Oh my gosh.
That was one of the.
It was one of the many religions that my
religions that
parents,
you-
or well, I shouldn't say religions, but one of the many types of different denomination of churches. So that was the one we started at.
What is a Quaker? It reminds
They're-
me of like a Amish or something.
they're-
Oh, you said Amish. in
They're
Pennsylvania.
not Amish. Quakers are a type of Protestant, and they're pacifists. So if you've they call it a Friends. It's the Friends Church. So everybody is friends. They have a meeting house, and like sometimes people will go in and just like you're just quiet. And I mean, from what I remember of the Friends Church that we went to, because a Quaker in the 18 and early 1900s is going to be a lot different than the Quakers of 1980 that that I went to church there. But
well,
it's just basically Christianity.
well, and the pilgrims
denomination.
that came across
Yes.
the Atlantic, they were Quakers. That's
Yes.
part of what they were fleeing, is because their religion, their version of Protestantism wasn't okay. in
Where
England.
was he born?
Wow.
So Nixon was born in Yorba Linda, California.
Oh, it's just interesting because so I was born and raised in Pennsylvania, which is like that area is one of the areas where very close to Massachusetts. A lot of the Pilgrims and settlers went to the Pennsylvania and Ohio regions, and we have a lot of Quakers. We also have a lot of Amish and a lot of Mennonites, and so I just was like, oh, maybe Nixon was from the East Coast, but nope,
No, born in
all
California.
the way across, and Quaker.
So in 1922, the family ranch failed, so Hannah and Francis moved the family to Whittier, California, where Francis opened up a grocery store in the local Quaker community there. As a newcomer to the community and the owner of a grocery store, he was, for lack of a better term, kind of low on the totem pole, which apparently is a much bigger deal in Quaker communities than it would be really anywhere else. And it was here that Richard Nixon attended East Whittier Elementary, where he was president of his 8th grade class. And
That's
when
adorable.
it's telling of things to come. When he went to high school, Hannah and Francis actually decided to send him to Fullerton High School. So he moved to Fullerton, California, lived with his aunt for a while. And while he was there, his brother actually got sick with tuberculosis. So he moved back to Whittier in 1928. Yeah, in 1928. To help run the family grocery store. So while he was in high school, he tried doing a bunch of different extracurriculars. He was part of the JV football team, but everything I read just says he was never used in, or he was rarely used in games.
Was he JV because he sucked?
I mean, he wasn't used in games, so probably.
So
Like he played baseball and basketball.
But he was benched when it came time to actually.
He was on the team.
Yeah, like he was a C bencher.
he's a participation trophy.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
see what
Right.
a tiny little Richard Nixon looks like.
He actually wasn't a bad-looking dude when he was a young man. So while he was in high school, Richard Nixon was actually a champion debater. He
Debateur.
he joined every debate team, or the debate team in every school that he attended.
Indubitably.
All right.
He really did actually. He was. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, what's the
Holy
opposite of
shit.
glow up? Like he went
Yeah,
backwards. the
he
older
did a
he got.
Benjamin Button.
He did a Benjamin Button.
Kind of.
Wow.
Tori has used the word indubitably twice today, and she just tries to slip it in
And
there
I'm just
like
slipping
it's
it in when I can.
Indubitably.
Because she told me she wanted me to say it, so
We
I'm
need the
fine.
Pee Wee Herman sound effects. It's the word of the day. Yeah. The couch moved. So Richard Nixon graduated 3rd in his class of 207 individuals in 1930 from Whittier High School. Remember,
30.
1930.
That's great. Like, I don't know. I just don't think of him being that old.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
All right, Emily's not allowed to push the button. Only
I'm not
Lindsay-
allowed to touch Instagram or
No.
cell phones. No.
Yeah, no. Lindsay's the only one because you and I, just like we interrupt people, will misuse that button. We will misuse it.
We realize what shit we are.
We do. We apologize,
We
but
are
we
trash.
clearly cannot change because we've
No.
tried and it gets worse when we try to be
And I
quiet.
just keep
And
telling
people
him
never
there's
change.
there's no point.
So after graduating high school, he was actually offered a tuition grant to Harvard, but he decided to attend Whittier College instead. He had his duties at the grocery store.
Oh yeah, the Quaker.
His sick brother.
Mm.
So
Oh,
he had other things. So he went to school closer to home.
Like, that's actually sort of sweet that he cared about his family enough that he wasn't like, bye, see ya, going to Harvard.
Didn't he have an accent?
That was
I was like, what? That was on track.
I was
That's
with
like,
enough
our
yeah,
questions out of you.
intro.
My question was going to be,
Like
where was he
that.
from? Fuck you, Lindsay. It's fine.
I'm so sorry. I
Fuck
just went
me.
like that.
I know that was hilarious. Timing. Didn't he have an accent? Is he the guy I'm thinking of that had an accent? Maybe I'm thinking of JFK. I'm thinking of JFK.
Yeah, you are. He
JFK
had that
was-
old
This
Oh,
makes
yeah,
sense too why I
Boston.
made the comment
Boston.
about him being good looking.
I was wondering if that's what you were
Right.
thinking.
I think I was thinking of JFK.
Yeah, Richard Nixon kind of just sounded like he was plugging his nose and gargling rocks the whole
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
It's the best way that I can
That's
describe how he spoke.
A very accurate description.
So while at Whittier, he was denied entrance to the only literary society, which is kind of like a fraternity at this college, for men, which I thought was interesting. That they only had one. Maybe it's a small college. I don't know, but it was called the Franklins, and this was partly due to lack of prominence of his family in town. Like I said, they weren't there
Oh,
that long,
ew.
so their standing in the community held Nixon
It's
back
shite.
from joining this particular frat.
Well, that
Which meant
sounds-
something way different back then. I mean, it was
Right.
you
Yeah.
wanted to be a part of a fraternity. It wasn't just a party station.
Right.
So he made his own. It was called the Orthogonian Society. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And despite the responsibilities of heading or being a co-founder of the society, his schoolwork, working at the store, he still managed to find time for things like becoming a champion debater at his college as well. Same thing. He tried playing basketball and baseball, and he was outgoing, but his parents didn't really want him playing sports, mainly because he had other things that he had to be doing in the family.
Tori? Fucking Tori?
Look, I
Put it in the
can't
bin.
help it.
Put it in the bin.
I can't
Put it in the
help
bin.
it if people call me.
Put it in the bin. Husband, I love you.
So Richard graduated summa cum laude. Sorry, I screw that up every time. It's like when I was typing this out, I kept writing Noxon instead of Nixon.
Oh yeah, it all blurs together.
Yeah. So he graduated summa cum laude from Whittier in 1934 and received a full scholarship to the Duke University School of Law. Here he graduated once again, third in his class in 1937. After graduating from Duke, Nixon tried joining the FBI, but he never heard anything back. It turns out, sometime later, I think maybe when he became VP, he found out that the FBI did hire him, but they had budget cuts, so they just never told him he got the
Aw.
job.
My God.
Wow.
And after graduating from Duke and not getting hired to the FBI, he moved back to Whittier and joined the California Bar, working at a law firm Wingert and Bewley.
Wingert.
Wingert
Wingert.
and Bewley.
Yeah, I had to double check that because I thought I was spelling it wrong like 4 times in a row, and I was like, no, that's it. And during his time there, he worked on commercial litigation for local petroleum companies and occasionally wills. He did not, I thought this was interesting, he did not like working divorce cases because Frank's sex talk with women made him extremely
Oh.
uncomfortable. I mean, this is the late 1930s, so maybe that's a little bit understandable. Women don't like sex, they just have it to make babies.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So he just didn't like dealing with divorce cases because he also didn't get divorced in this time.
Right.
No.
Well,
True.
and I think being Quaker too,
Yeah.
which is a
what
very
I
was thinking, too.
puritanical kind of.
So he opened a new branch of Wingert and Bewley in La Habra, California, and became a following partner the following year, or became a full partner the following year. Later, he would he would proudly proclaim that he was the only modern president to have previously practiced law, which I thought was especially funny because that seems to ignore 3 of the presidents that were serving during his lifetime that practiced law. Woodrow Wilson in 1913 to 1921. I remember he was born
Oh my God.
time.
Right. Yeah.
Calvin Coolidge, 1923 to 1929, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 1933 to 1945. One of the most important, influential
The
presidents
presidents
in
ever.
history.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'm the only practicing lawyer. Well, it's funny because he graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in History from Whittier. So just
Oh.
immediately ignoring history.
Oh, there are little buds on the tree. Spring is coming.
I know.
So tell us.
So Richard Nixon enlisted in the Navy in 1942. He would later suggest that this was his response to the attacks on Pearl Harbor in 1941.
Oh.
There's not really anything that contradicts that, so I have no reason to believe otherwise. He ended up moving post to post. He spent some time at sea in the Pacific, and he had not a long Navy career, but it was he rose through the ranks pretty quick, so his service was fairly distinguished. He was promoted to commander in the U.S. Naval Reserve in 1945 and retired in 1946. There's really nothing of big note that happened during that time period. In 1946, still living in California, he ran for a seat for California's 12th congressional district on the advice of Herman Perry. Herman Perry was the manager of Whittier's Bank of America branch. And he ran as a Republican because the Republicans were looking for a strong opponent to the Democratic Representative Jason Voorhees, or Voorhis. I'm not entirely positive.
I think it's
Jason?
Voorhees.
Jason's in
Jason
charge
Voorhees.
of.
It's
Isn't that-
Voorhis, so it's
Oh.
spelled a little bit
Oh.
different.
Oh, so not like
It's so-
Jason with the
No, not the machete.
not the
That's right.
machete and the
Killer
hockey
Mom
mask.
guy.
I just
Jason.
imagined him.
I was thinking Jenny from the Block when you said that. Jason from the. I was like Jason from the.
Oh, is this a mask?
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
that was
This is
my-
a mask.
Because it's a hockey mask, right?
Jason from
Yeah.
the.
I actually have never seen any of the Jason movies.
Neither have I.
I know it hurts Lindsay's soul.
So sad.
I mean, I have
Oh
watched
my
the Halloween
God.
ones.
I watched the Halloween, the newer-ish one, and he killed a like rat or something, and then I realized I can't watch animals.
That
anymore.
they don't do
seen-
anything else with the animals.
A lot of the
God.
original and Nightmare on Elm Street, but
Yeah, I never
I have
that.
seen I've seen
Have you
Nightmare
guys-
on Elm Street.
Texas.
Although-
Chainsaw?
Yes.
Uh,
Although I did see Wes Craven's New Nightmare before I saw.
I did too on accident, and I
Yeah.
loved New Nightmare.
when was the
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Texas
when was the
Chainsaw.
original one? When did that come out?
70s?
I never saw the original one.
Oh, you saw the Jessica fucking.
I don't
Biel
even know
one?
when did that come out. I was like middle school.
They've redone it a couple times. It's not been.
They keep
happening.
redoing
Michael
I
is
wanna say it was,
waiting
like, the
so
early
patiently for us to
2000s.
just shut up. And...
He is. I think he's used to it. I'm not saying that makes it better. I'm just telling you that this is
Yeah.
not new to him.
Back to Nixon. So this was now we're we're post Navy.
Yeah, so we're post Navy and pre.
That made me like
Motherfucker, this is my podcast.
drool out of my mouth.
None of you can do this without me. I don't want you to learn how to do it because then you're all gonna kick me out. All of you.
No.
Michael will replace me.
Pre. This is why it takes so
This
long.
is why we're here all day.
Yeah.
Husband, I love you so much.
So we are post Navy, and he's just been.
Oh now you want me? Oh, let me unmute myself, sir.
No, I got it. He's just been persuaded to run for a congressional district seat
Oh right,
Oh.
by the
1946,
guy
by a
that
bank manager.
by a bank manager, which is
He
interesting.
was probably on the board for the
Hey,
local
man.
Republican Party or whatever.
We all know that money and politics
Right.
are bedfellows.
Part of Nixon's platform for the seat was that Voorhis was ineffective as a representative, and that his endorsement by a group linked to communists meant that Jerry had some radical views himself. This will actually set a precedent for Nixon's entire career.
Right. And
Uh,
like communism was a big communism was a big it was becoming a really big deal and fear and
Yeah, after
was-
World War II, when the Iron Curtain went up initially with the USSR, pretty much every capitalist country in the world was scared shitless about the takeover of
Right.
communism.
was and I'm sure you're probably going to get to this, but was Hoover the director of the FBI during Nixon's administration?
I don't part of it, I think.
Okay.
I don't. I didn't really get into much of that because it
Yeah.
didn't matter for
Right.
this. But the answer to your question is yes,
Okay.
and we get into it a little bit, but it's not
Mhm.
really integral to
He's
a lot of
just a
this.
shady character, that Hoover.
Yeah, you could do a whole podcast series about Hoover.
Maybe
Maybe
we should have you. Sorry, maybe we should have you come back and talk
That's
about
exactly
Hoover.
what I was just gonna say. I was just gonna say.
I need you to know that right now I'm writing do historical true
I
crime.
was. Yep. That's
Oh,
exactly.
Once every 2 months.
If
have
you would
come
like
in.
a
Yes.
platform, apparently here it is.
You
Because
gotta-
I was gonna
we
say,
wanna
I
know
wonder
more.
if people would love to hear
See how this episode
historical
goes
true
first.
Yeah.
crime. But yeah, he's like, maybe I don't want to work with you. Fuck, I'm
Very
gonna
true. You might not
smack
wanna.
my wife across.
Like maybe
her
I'd like to
face.
have a true crime podcast, but I
Not
don't want
with
you three
you.
bitches. Don't shut up.
Yeah.
So he actually won the seat. He beat Jerry Voorhis. I almost said Jason Voorhees again. During his time in the congressional district, he supported anti-labor union laws, which unions are often seen as communist. He supported the Marshall Plan, which was designed to help Europe rebuild after World War II because Europe was devastated. The entire continent was just destroyed. And the Marshall Plan also had the added side effect of making capitalism look real good, so it made the communist USSR look not good. He joined the House of Un-American Activities in 1947, which is where Hoover would come in, right up there with McCarthy.
Yes, he
What's
was
his
the
face?
head. Yes,
McCarthy, Roy Cohn, all of those people.
that's a whole nother one that you should cover for
That's,
us, is because the trial and like the lives that they destroyed. I mean, it was
Modern-day witch hunt.
yeah. I was just gonna say that it was the same thing, and people lost careers and lives, and the
A lot of Hollywood actors were blacklisted.
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
And then you had the that couple, the Rosenbergs. And
were they the ones that actually ended up being spies?
No, I think that
Did you study?
I think that they
history?
were innocent In college, no. But as I've gotten older, I'm like, I need to know about this. So,
That's awesome. I was just
you know,
curious.
when I'm not doing a true crime documentary, I'm either watching ancient history and like I think the Middle East and Egypt and like just that's fascinating, like the ancient tombs and stuff, but also historical stuff because we don't learn it in
No,
school.
it's not
Very
taught.
true.
And sometimes it's awesome to watch it from other countries because that
Yeah.
definitely puts a different spin.
The real life spin.
Well, because I think every country probably rewrites their history to make them
Oh yeah.
look better. I'm sure like Japanese history books describe Pearl Harbor very differently than ours. So like if they Google something,
On the dark web.
I think I watched something about that. It was like if you try to look up Tank Man in China, like so the guy that walked out in front of the,
Oh, it's Tiananmen
Mhm.
Square.
yeah, that like there's no record, like they don't get any search results back for that, and that's the censorship. But also, like things like Google and Bing and search engines have to agree to that. I mean they're part of anyway. Sorry, tangent. Not going to do it.
Well, there's a whole big discussion about what the rise of social media has done for dictatorships and
Mhm.
genocides and a bunch of other stuff. But that's a topic for another time.
It is.
In 1942, Richard Nixon co-sponsored the Subversive Activities Control Bill, also known as the Munt-Nixon Bill.
The what?
The Munt-Nixon Bill. Munt was one of the other Congress people that helped co-author
Terrible
the-
name.
Well,
I thought you said Mutt Nixon, and I was like, oh, that just has like a odd sound to it. I didn't like that. Okay,
No,
someone's
Munt.
name.
Munt-Nixon.
Munt. Ugh.
In his memoirs, Nixon wrote that this bill was a new approach to the complicated problem of internal communist subversion. It provided for registration of all Communist Party members and required a statement of the source of all printed and broadcast material issued by organizations that were found to be communist fronts.
That is super creepy.
Yeah,
Like that's
it's
like we're gonna put your name on a list.
it's yeah. It ties right into the House of Un-American Activities where we're basically going to blacklist you from everything. It's a 1948 version of Big Brother almost.
Yeah.
They don't
well,
have CCTV, but by golly, they'll put you on a list. You'll never work again.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
By
fascinating.
golly.
By golly.
That's,
But
what it was, that's probably what he said.
yeah, no. But no, I mean, it is fascinating that they're so worried about communism that they're going to these dictator,
They're doing some communist shit.
like we're the more like fascist.
yeah.
Anyway, sorry. Done.
Now, I don't bring up Nixon's anti-communist ideals to make a political point, but instead to note that Richard Nixon's anti-communist ideals are actually partially responsible for gaining him national attention. Suddenly, he went from because he was on the House of Un-American Activities, which was televised.
Yeah.
I guess it would have been televised, at least in part.
mhm.
But it was broadcast to the nation because people were interested. Like, oh, this Hugh Grant's a communist.
Mhm.
Hugh Grant's still alive, isn't he?
He is,
He's-
yes.
Okay.
He asks me that about literally everyone. Like anyone.
Jay-Z's dead, right?
Anybody. Anytime we listen to music, he goes, "Is this Jay-Z? Is this Flavor Flav? Is Flavor Flav still
Flavor Flav
alive?"
is still
I'm
alive.
is.
so out
Flavor
of touch with
Flav,
anything
but
that's not
Flavor
metal
Flav
that
probably
I
shouldn't be. I'm not saying that I wish him harm or that he should
He's
die,
like a
but I'm
walking
just
mummy.
like, yeah, like I don't know how he's alive. I guess
know
is
either.
a better way to
Jay-Z.
put it.
Married to
No,
Beyonce,
make-
that would
no.
keep me alive too. So remember, being suspected of being a communist in the 40s was basically one of the worst things that you could be is someone accusing you or someone you know of being a communist. Because it kind of just branched out from there. Even if I said Tory was a communist, that somehow
But then-
attaches to Lindsay, which would
Right.
attach to Emily. So
Yeah.
it
So then you
It
boycott the
cascades.
whole podcast.
right.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think at that point too, like just the accusation was
Just
enough
that
to destroy
alone.
you.
Oh yeah, especially in Hollywood. Hollywood.
Yeah.
I think we mentioned this earlier, but Hollywood had a lot of actors that were blacklisted just
Yeah.
on someone said that I think they're a communist, and
Yeah.
that was all it took. In November 1949, Richard Nixon ran for the U.S. Senate along against incumbent Sheridan Downey. Downey was battling with Representative Helen Douglas for the primary. Sheridan Downey retired in March 1950. With the Senate primary elections down to Nixon and Douglas, Nixon pulled out the old communist trick again.
Oh no.
He distributed what was known as a pink sheet, showing that Douglas historically voted in line with New York Congressman Vito Marcantonio, who some believed to be a communist. This caused voters to suspect Helen Douglas of also being a communist, and Nixon won the election for the Senate seat by almost 20% of the vote, earning him the moniker Tricky Dick for the first time.
Oh, I don't like that.
No.
Mm-mm.
That's
You don't like
that's
the name?
Mm-mm.
that's something that actually followed him for his entire career.
Yeah.
Was Tricky Dick,
I hate
and it
that.
all started with this 1950 election for Senate.
Wow, I didn't think that name happened until the 70s when all this was.
Do you want to see me do a dicky trick? That's what I would ask people. You want to see? Wait,
Don't
what
be
was his name?
Don't be gross.
Don't. What was his name?
Richard Nixon.
Richard.
Tricky Dick.
So
Tricky
Tricky Dick.
Tricky Dick.
You want to see my dicky trick? That sounds like a line in a rap song.
It does. Something Little Nas would say.
God bless America.
Will you say the W word one more time?
Worship?
I'm gonna ask everyone on the internet if you say it weird.
Worship.
A worship?
Worship.
Worship.
No,
A
there's no E.
warship is a ship at war.
No, I'm not saying an A. I'm
We
saying
have had
worship.
this conversation for years.
I was gonna say this is
Years.
feels deep.
Okay,
And
so when you're
Years.
writing and you see the word O-R, do you say or do you say er?
You
Because
say
that's how you're
"er."
saying worship.
Worship. There's not an A. Say it. What?
Worship?
are you saying worship? Or
He says
worship?
it the same way.
See? Because it's right.
Worship.
How are you supposed to say it?
Worship.
No.
Worship?
Like
Worship.
worship. I'm gonna go
You're
worship.
looking at me like I'm crazy. You
I'm
two
gonna
are fucking
worship
crazy.
I feel like W-E-R.
No.
Yeah.
Your way of saying it would be W-A-R. You're
No.
both wrong. Nope, absolutely not. This is my
Worship.
podcast. Fuck you both.
worship.
I know it's worship.
seriously
Worship.
hate to agree with Emily here, but I hear worship.
worship.
Like, I'm going to play Battleship with my warship.
Maybe you and I have an accent. Like maybe I'm from Pennsylvania.
We talk weird.
So, Internet, if you want to hear my sultry voice, just go ahead and agree with me.
I think when we post this episode, we need to put up a poll.
Yeah,
Like,
I
what do
will
they hear?
absolutely. What do you hear? Worship or worship? You are so
But the
wrong.
thing
I
is,
can't
we've
stand
said it so many times now that now it sounds the same to me. Worship.
Say it your way.
Worship.
Worship.
War. It's like
Worship.
Worship.
It's like people that say water.
Water. Well, I said it too much.
Come on in with those.
Washington. That's the only thing I'm
Washington?
looking at is
Washington?
Washington.
I live in
You know,
Spokane, Washington.
Spokane,
Washington.
Washington.
My favorite podcast, Behind the Bastards, Robert Evans says Coeur d'Alene.
Caroline.
Coeur d'Alene.
d'Alene.
And also Spokane, because there's been
Yeah.
a couple bastards on this
Yeah.
show that have been from this area.
Spokane.
Spokane. That one's pretty common. I deal with a lot of people from the East Coast. That
Yeah.
They get Spokane. Yeah,
When I
yeah,
used to
that's not
do
too-
work for the knitting factory for bands, they would always say Spokane. What the fuck is this? Where am I?
Spokane.
Yeah,
because it's
always.
Native American, so
Yeah.
it's said different than
It's
it should be in
Yeah.
English.
I think I handled it well moving out here because the place that I grew up in Pennsylvania was also very like we have the Susquehanna friends. So um
That sounds like something we
like
would
we have
here.
very native names for places.
Lindsay's looking at me like we need to get this back on track. So
No.
during his 3 years in the Senate, Nixon was critical of then President Harry Truman, supported statehood for Alaska in 1958 and Hawaii in 1959, voted in favor of civil rights for minorities, disaster relief for overseas countries, and benefits for illegal immigrants. In 1953, General Dwight D. Eisenhower was the Republican presidential nominee without a preference for vice president, and the party suggested Richard Nixon as Eisenhower's running mate, due in large part to his strong anti-communist stance and voter base in California. Because even in the 1940s and 50s, California was the biggest.
The big state to win.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you won California, you had a very good chance of just kind of coasting the rest of the way. Battleground states weren't really a thing in this time period. Places like Ohio that only get campaigning because they're huge states now.
The
Yeah.
8 states that decide who our president is.
Right.
yeah.
Here in Washington, it doesn't matter. Because
Right.
by the time our votes are tallied, it's basically already over.
Yeah.
On the campaign trail, it was leaked to the press that Nixon had a political fund that was refunding campaign expenses, and though this was not illegal, it could create a conflict of interest. That's another thing from this time period that might seem real silly today, where anyone, you and I, can donate to a political
Mhm.
PAC. It doesn't matter as long as the campaign expenses are being used properly. Who cares?
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing back then. Election bids were largely self-funded or funded from
Oh,
like
okay.
family or people who wanted you on the to be elected for whatever reason. And this actually almost led to Eisenhower replacing him as running mate because it created such a scandal that Eisenhower's like, I don't know that I can win with you attached to me.
Was Eisenhower a Republican? Was
Yes.
this okay?
Yes, he was running as a Republican. On September 23rd, 1952, Nixon went on television, which was another wildly new concept at this time. The House of Un-American Activities was partially televised, but mostly broadcast on radio. So Nixon going on television to address the nation was crazy.
Wow.
Big new.
This address was later coined the Checkers speech and showed Richard's incredible ability to sway the public opinion. He went on to say that he had never received any special favors, that he was a man of modest means, and his wife didn't wear a mink coat, and that he was a patriot.
No mink in this family.
Well, that was
But that
His
makes
status.
sense.
so. This
like-
was actually
Yeah.
mink. I had to think about that one myself for a little bit. Mink coats, they're expensive now,
Right.
Yeah.
if you can even find them, because it's
Oh,
animal cruelty.
Yeah.
At the time, Richard Nixon's wife, Pat, I do not remember her actual first name, but everyone called her Pat. I'm a hack and a fraud, so I would have had that written down otherwise. But his wife, Pat, was mortified by this speech because it actually
Yeah.
showed how little the Nixon household owned. Because
Right.
they weren't rich people. You didn't have to be a millionaire.
He
to run
wasn't a
for office.
Kennedy.
He wasn't a Kennedy. That's a good way of putting it. He didn't have this huge. He wasn't. He didn't come from a rich family. So the source for this actually said this speech will be remembered for the gift he did receive, but would not give back.
Oof.
A little cocker spaniel dog sent all the way from Texas, and our little girl named it Checkers.
Oh my god, is it gonna be a sad story?
No, that's basically it about Checkers.
Oh, okay.
They had a dog. That was Nixon saying, "I haven't received any special favors, except this dog."
Oh, right. Like I'm not this. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not giving a dog
Okay.
back.
Right, I'm willing to
Yeah.
give anything back, but this dog is part of our family now.
Fair.
Right.
This gained him just massive national approval.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, I would have been like, he
yeah.
loves his dog,
Sold.
not giving up
Done.
his dog. Go
he-
ahead, Nixon.
So after this speech, Eisenhower actually decided to keep Nixon on as his running mate for VP, and the Eisenhower-Nixon ticket was elected in 1952. During his time as vice president, Nixon was given far more responsibility than any VP before him. He often sat in on cabinet and National Security Council meetings, and when Eisenhower was not there, it doesn't really say why he wouldn't be there. But when he wasn't, Nixon actually sat in and led these meetings for Eisenhower. He toured the Far East, increasing local goodwill toward the U.S., especially in French Indonesia, which at the time encompassed Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and parts of China. Upon his return, he devoted much of his time to developing relations with foreign countries. In 1956, Eisenhower and Nixon won re-election, and in 1957, Nixon went on another goodwill trip to Africa, which helped him help convince President Eisenhower to sign the Civil Rights Act of 1957. In 1958, Richard and his wife Pat went on another goodwill trip to South America. This time wasn't as good as when he went to places like French Indochina and Africa. This was in large part due to the capitalist Americans helping overthrow socialist and communist regimes, most of which, in fact, were democratically elected. But since they were socialist and that doesn't jive with capitalism, the Americans decided to step in, overthrow these.
I like that you said it doesn't compute or doesn't compete well with capitalism, not democracy, because they're two very different things that I don't
extremely
think
different things.
that we as people tend to say we live in a democracy, and we use those two terms interchangeably, and they're not. So I liked that you
Sometimes they
said
are,
that.
but if for our purposes
just
here,
here, they're not the same.
I don't believe I go into it, but like the Banana Wars at this point, it's the company that became Chiquita.
Mhm.
Now
Mm.
the Chilean government, I think, owned a bunch of land or didn't own land because Chiquita owned all of it, and then they weren't using half of it. And when a socialist was elected into office, he's like, "Hey, I'm going to take this land back, nationalize it again because you guys aren't using it anyway."
Right.
and it sparked the whole thing where he was overthrown, and then the government was given to Augusto Pinochet.
He does know.
I know. He also knows everything about like superheroes and like Marvel characters
Oh, not
and like
everything.
I need to talk to you about Batman then when we're done.
you're a genius. I married a genius.
Thank you. Now, at this time, many South American countries were in severe political turmoil, in large part due to American intervention in overthrowing socialist and communist governments in favor of more capitalist favoring ones. The trip was going fine until the couple made it to Peru, where Nixon was met with a student demonstration at the National University of San Marcos. A protesting mob formed his hotel. His limousine was surrounded by a pipe-wielding mob in Caracas, Venezuela.
My God.
Wow.
Oof.
Yeah, they were spitting on them.
They were
and
It's not a.
very
Ouch.
unhappy.
his composure during this trip earned him some respect from even his political opponents and buttressed Nixon's already strong communist rhetoric. While he was there, Nixon actually stood his ground and faced off against this mob while they're like throwing fruit and spitting on him
Wow.
until his security detail forced him into his limo and like made him leave because he's the vice president
Wow.
of the U.S.
I mean, I guess that's ballsy. And
That is
like,
very ballsy.
Yeah.
if you're gonna have opinions, he stands
He's-
by
I
them.
was gonna
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
at least he stands by it, supports it.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing Richard Nixon was really good about, it was holding to his convictions. He believed
True.
one thing, and that's pretty much what he stuck with the entire time, as long as it made political sense for him to do so. In 1960, Richard Nixon ran for president against John F. Kennedy. Now, Nixon was campaigning on experience. He was a congressional district seat holder. He was on the Senate for 3 years. He was VP for 6 years at this point. 8 years. Yeah, coming up on 8 years at this point. So, I mean, he's
In that
extremely
world.
experienced. Kennedy, being the extremely good-looking man that he
Mhm.
was campaigning on a call for new blood, saying that the Eisenhower-Nixon White House had allowed the Soviets to overtake America in ballistic missiles. Now, Nixon did not do very good against JFK in the primaries. A little big part of this was because he was not an attractive person. And he
Yeah.
was at this point he was beginning to age a little bit. His face was a little bit droopy, and on TV it looked like he just constantly had a 5 o'clock shadow.
He was
He
like
just-
hunched over too.
Yeah, he just
right?
looked
kinda
haggard
like,
all the
meh.
time.
And Kennedy was well known and handsome
charismatic.
young,
Rich
and
and-
extremely charismatic.
And on so many amphetamines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was on
He was
so
so drugged up all the time.
much.
Because JFK's
drugs.
back was all fucked up,
Mhm.
like really bad.
Yeah.
So he was just constantly
always-
drugged out.
It was-
But he held it well.
Yeah, he did.
Now, being unattractive wouldn't matter if these were only broadcasted on the radio like they had always been previously. But these were the first presidential debates that were televised.
God, imagine just seeing him and then Kennedy.
Yeah, you
it's
look
just
at
like,
Nixon and then hold him up against Kennedy. It's not good.
No.
No, not
Nixon got his ass beat. He was a great orator, like I said, on radio. Awesome. A
Yeah.
lot of the people that were only listening on radio thought he won all the debates because he's just a better speaker than Kennedy was.
Yeah.
But he just couldn't compete with Kennedy's photogenic good looks on TV. He won the 1960 election by a narrow margin of 0.2%. So
Wow.
he just barely lost.
Jesus.
Now, there were allegations of voter fraud in some states.
Mm.
Mostly states Kennedy won. But Nixon actually refused to contest the election results, saying that a long drawn out controversy would make the U.S. look bad
What the fuck?
because this was
What's that like about?
yeah, right? I mean,
Uh,
it's crazy to think that it's like, no, Nixon put the country first.
Like even when they're shits, they still have some fucking honor
yeah.
and
I mean,
integrity in a little bit.
well, this is also in the middle of the Cold War,
Right.
Oh,
so
yeah.
the Cuban Missile Crisis just a couple years from now.
Yeah.
Nixon didn't want to make the U.S. look bad in front of places like the USSR.
Yeah.
Cuba.
Western,
Oh, fuck.
Western Europe that was looking to America for guidance at this
Yeah,
point,
right.
while they are still rebuilding their countries. So he stepped back and he actually vowed to not run for president again in 1964.
Wow.
Now, Kennedy was assassinated in 1962. Lyndon Johnson took over as vice president, as acting president. And Nixon still thought that beating Lyndon Johnson would be too difficult, so he held his vow to not run in 1964.
Though Johnson was kind of a bit of a shit show.
He's a piece of shit.
Yeah, he's not a good. He's not on
From
my
what I
list of
learned
ones I
about
like.
Kennedy and
You said he died in 1962, Kennedy. He died in 1963.
Oh yeah, it was
11/22/63.
Oh shit,
I should know that because I have that big ass book.
that's a typo.
Got you, boo.
Oh, I bet you this is why I put 1962. So Richard Nixon ran for governor of California in 1962. He lost to the incumbent Pat Brown. For the 1964 presidential election, Barry Goldwater from Arizona, he was a senator from Arizona, did run for president, and despite feeling that Goldwater didn't have a great chance of winning, Nixon went ahead and campaigned for him anyway because he was not going to run for president. This would prove correct when Goldwater was pretty soundly beaten by Lyndon Johnson. In 1967, with the Democratic Party torn over the issue of the Vietnam War, Nixon felt a Republican had a pretty good chance of winning, so why not him? Between the Tet Offensive, President Johnson's choice to withdraw his candidacy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy's assassination in California right after winning the Democratic primary, and his Democratic opponent's nomination convention marked by violent anti-Vietnam War protests, Nixon built a reputation as a figure of stability for the country. He finally figured out this newfangled television thing. He railed against high crime rates in cities, which is pretty much every presidential candidate has done since. And he promised an end to the war in Vietnam. I read a blurb, but I couldn't find anything confirming it, but I guess there's an ongoing controversy that the Nixon campaign interfered with negotiations between the Johnson administration and the South Vietnamese, but this was never explicitly proven, so I'm not going to hold that against him, but it's a thing that's out there that people are saying, hey, he fucked up peace talks.
So he intentionally fucked up the talks so that if and when he won, he could say,
He'll fix it.
I stopped the war in Vietnam.
Well, not only that, but it also makes Lyndon Johnson look bad.
Yeah.
Right,
The
because
Johnson
he can't
administration, because
get,
the
they
Democrats
can't,
are
right.
ineffective, they can't even end a war.
And so I think the Democratic convention that you're talking about is the same one that the Chicago 10, that movie
shit
is
isn't
so,
I
oh
have a hard
my
time with those.
What
God,
is it?
It's actually really good. So, they made a movie that's on Netflix, but it's a true story. And this different groups of protesters, which included Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, who were very famous anti-war protesters, as well as a guy that later became a senator. It was just like this group of people that had been at the protest for the Democratic National Convention. It was in Chicago, and the police actually ended up causing a riot with the protesters. But these 7 people, with the addition of Bobby Seale, who was a high-ranking member of the Black Panthers, were arrested for inciting to riot. And it goes through their trial. You just have to watch it. Like, their trial is a complete injustice. And especially with Bobby Seale, like, at one point the judge literally orders him to be like shackled and strapped to his seat, and he is bound and gagged in the courtroom. It's insane. So maybe I'll have to cover that story. If you haven't watched the Chicago 10, you should. I think you would really enjoy it. Actually, I'm sorry. It's the Trial of the Chicago 7 is what's on Netflix. There is a documentary which is incredible, and that one is called the Chicago 10 because it includes Bobby Seale and the attorneys. But
If you want to see Borat and Third Rock from the Sun Kid,
yes,
He's in it.
Joseph
that's all I know.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt,
Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
is in the Netflix movie, the Chicago 7, as Sacha Baron Cohen plays Abby
He was
Hoffman.
actually, I think, nominated for an Oscar or a Golden Globe for that. I'll do this for myself.
Oh my god, I almost just shit my pants.
Do you guys realize that Nixon hasn't been president yet?
Oh yeah, weird.
We haven't. This isn't even a Watergate episode at the moment. It's just the history of Richard Nixon.
So literally, Richard Nixon was elected president of the United States in 1968, narrowly beating out Hubert Humphrey.
Look, we got
That
to
was
it.
the next sentence.
Like, if you ladies would just be quiet.
Shut the fuck up, Emily.
So during his presidency, Nixon met with Chairman Mao Zedong of the Chinese Communist Party to open relations with the West, which is not necessarily bad. He royally fucked up Vietnam by, among other things, bombing Cambodia instead of pulling out of the war like he promised, which helped pave the way for Pol Pot to take over Cambodia. which is anti-communist that led to a dictatorship.
What's Pol Pox?
Pol Pot. He
Pol
was
Pot. Oh, gotcha.
he was the leader of the Khmer Rouge that
Yep.
took over for.
For some reason, when I heard Pol Pox, I was like, okay, what kind of disease spread through Cambodia?
No,
But
Pol Pot.
got it. Pol Pot. Yes, that right.
He stepped up covert operations against Fidel Castro in Cuba, which is anti-communism and anti-USSR, authorized the overthrow of a democratically elected Marxist leader in Chile, leading to brutal dictator Augusto Pinochet, which is anti-communism. Fun fact, his favorite method of execution, flying someone in a helicopter and just shoving them out.
What the fuck? Oh my god, no.
He opened relations with the USSR to establish defense pacts, trade agreements, the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, but he also went to war with the Soviets over the Arab-Israeli conflict. So, mixed bag with him. He attempted unsuccessfully to control inflation caused by the war, because things were just getting too damn expensive because the war complex just keeps on churning.
Right.
But he did help establish what we now know as the U.S. Post Office and the EPA,
Interesting.
Huh.
which
I didn't know
are
that.
decidedly good things.
Yeah.
He did a bunch of other stuff during his first term, but we don't really care about most of that for the purposes of today.
No, because the drama is so much more interesting
It
than
is.
any good work that you do.
And I mean, really, the last 2,000 words or so were only spent talking about how much of a mixed bag Richard Nixon is, because it all lends itself to what we're actually here to talk
Yeah.
about, and that is the Watergate scandal.
Watergate.
Yep. She makes that noise sometimes.
Did that come from you?
Yeah.
I thought Michael made it, but then
Nope.
he made this face like,
Where the fuck did that come from?
and then I was really confused.
I make it all the time.
Lindsay
I
makes
don't-
it all the time.
all the time. I don't know.
I don't
all the
even
time
hear
I'm doing
it, but I heard that
That's
one.
funny.
All right, ready. I'm listening to you, even if they're not.
Oh, that's fun. So here's where we finally get into why we're actually here, the real true crime part.
Yeah.
Now, I mentioned Forrest Gump earlier. We all
Yes.
mentioned Forrest Gump earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Because specifically of the scene where Forrest is offered a nicer hotel room by Nixon, and in the middle of the night he sees some lights in the office across the way, is what he says, and he calls the maintenance or the front desk, saying, "Hey, I think you need to get a maintenance team to that office over there because their fuse box is out, and I think they're looking for a light." And then it cuts away immediately to Richard giving his resignation speech, and then just kind of goes off because Forrest just gallivants through history. And as amusing and silly as this was, it kind of belies the true absurdity of the real operation. And we're going to get into a lot of names because there are a lot of people
That were
mixed up in
involved.
this. A lot of people. I'm going to try my best to keep everyone separate, but they're all so intertwined, and there's so many of them. I apologize. This does get a little bit confusing. In January 1972, G. Gordon Liddy.
What?
That's not his name.
Oh.
All right. In 1972, G. Gordon Liddy presented a plan to the Committee for the Re-election of the President. I think that's funny because if you ignore how acronyms work, it kind of spells out creep. But from now on, we're just going to call it the CRP
CRP.
because that's how acronyms actually work. With a plan to wiretap and sabotage the Democratic Party's own candidate, George McGovern. This committee included the acting chairman, Jeb Magruder, Attorney General John Mitchell, and Presidential Counsel John Dean, who later enlisted CIA officers E. Howard Hunt and James McCord. James McCord later took over the role of CRP security coordinator when Mitchell resigned as Attorney General to become the official CRP chairman. Almost said headman, which is kind of the same. At the time, John Mitchell reviewed the plan as overly complicated and put a kibosh on it until 2 months later when he proposed a pared-down version of the plan. I would really like to see what the original version of that plan is with how insane the actual one is. Now, the part most people are at least passingly familiar with was the plan to burglarize the Democratic National Committee's headquarters at the Watergate Hotel complex in D.C. The mission was to photograph and steal top-secret DNC documents and wiretap phones to get a leg up on the oncoming debates and campaign trail. On May 11th, James McCord, arranged for Alfred C. Baldwin III, former bodyguard to John Mitchell's wife, remember that, it becomes important, to stay in room 419 of Howard Johnson's motel across the street from the Watergate Hotel. The operation was scheduled to begin on May 28th. The first break-in was a success, with documentation being photographed and phones being wiretapped as planned. The first phone belonged to Robert Spencer Oliver, who at the time was working as the executive director of the Association of State Democratic Chairmen. The other belonged to DNC Chairman Larry O'Brien, though the FBI never found any evidence of his phone actually being tapped. It was determined later that an effective listening device was just placed in Oliver's phone that picked up everything Larry O'Brien was saying. Despite the successful installation of listening devices, it soon became apparent that repairs were needed to the transistor radio in the office, so a second burglary was planned to take care of the situation. Sometime after midnight on June 17th, 1972, a Watergate complex security guard, Frank Willis, noticed that there was tape on the latches of the doors leading to the parking garage to multiple offices deeper into the complex. Now, at the time, Frank just kind of removed the tape and shrugged his shoulders and said, "That's weird." Continued making his rounds, but he returned later and saw more tape on the same doors. At this time, he called the cops, believing that a break-in had occurred. 3 plainclothes cops arrived on the scene. They were on a late-night burn run, is what the source called it. They were basically just in a car, keeping an eye for drug deals and street crime. So they showed up dressed in hippie costumes. And Alfred Baldwin was in the motel across the street, that Howard Johnson motel. He was supposed to be keeping lookout, but he was watching TV, so he didn't notice the cops show up and go into the building. By the time he did notice it and try radioing the burglars that were there fixing the radios, they were already caught. Fuck. 5 men were arrested, and again, I'm going to apologize because I'm probably butchering at least a couple of these. Virgilio Gonzalez, Bernard Barker, James McCord, Eugenio Martinez, and Frank Sturgis. The men were charged with attempted burglary and attempted interception of telephone communications. They were found with lockpicks, door jimmies, $2,300 in sequential $100 bills, a shortwave police scanner, 40 rolls of unexposed film, 2 cameras, and 3 pen-sized tear gas guns, presumably for their inevitable escape.
Oh my God.
Wow.
What's film? I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I've kept my mouth shut for so long. I needed just one little burst. Now I can go back.
At this point, the cover-up was on. The first order of business was labeling the 4 men with McCord as Cuban freedom fighters he had recruited. Almost immediately, the FBI discovered contact information for E. Howard Hunt in both Barker's and Martinez's address books. This was an issue because Hunt, along with G. Gordon Liddy, was involved with the White House Plumbers, which was another secret group meant to stop leaks out of the White House.
Oh,
Plumbers.
Smart. I don't like it.
I think that's clever.
They're their whole other thing, and I did a
That's
little bit of research, but most of
surprising.
it doesn't really tie into this, so I'm not going to cover it.
Surprisingly clever. That's why it's alarming for politicians.
It's a bit ironic because they're meant to stop leaks while
But
they're
they're-
intentionally causing a whole bunch.
Mm-hmm.
No, I hate that jelly bean. It tastes terrible.
We're never gonna get through this,
Mm-mm.
Emily. No, I'm just kidding.
I
We're
know.
roughly halfway through.
No, I'm just teasing you.
She's not. It's accurate.
So once they were connected to the Watergate burglary, a top aide in the administration, John Ehrlichman, was tasked to deep six the contents of Hunt's White House safe, handing them to John Dean and the FBI's acting director for destruction.
Can you spell that last name for me?
Ehrlichman?
Like a man licking the air. That's how I would explain it at the airport.
Excuse
Excuse me, can you spell that? A man licking the air. Ehrlichman.
That's how I would explain that at the airport.
What are you doing this at the airport?
You know, when you say your name, you're like, yeah, plane ticket for Emily Ehrlichman. And they're like, okay, can you spell that, please? A man licking the air. That's how you spell it. Like bison with a K. That's what I used to tell people was my last name. They'd be like, how do you spell that? Like bison with a K. And they'd be like, oh, same thing.
Exactly the same. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Fuck everybody.
Now, initially, Nixon...
I didn't make that noise. I was being very
What
quiet.
if you put one of those in here? Jolson, I thought you were gonna hit me. What if you put one of those in there? Will it blow up like Mentos and soda? Can I try?
Oh, it's my water.
Oh no, I gotta get the horn back.
I think we may have lost her completely. Keep going, man. Just
Initially, Nixon reacted with skepticism when he learned of the break-in, asking on tape, "Who was the asshole that did that?"
my God, that was really good Nixon impression.
Been practicing all week. Later, he ordered that the CIA block any investigation into the source of the funding for the operation.
Oof.
He was also on record as saying that John Dean had thoroughly investigated the incident, when Dean had in fact not done that.
Wow.
Nixon further elaborated that I can say categorically that no one in the White House staff, no one in this administration,
It's the jinky
Every
truck.
Sunday.
every
Every
Sunday.
fucking Sunday they drive by. You have to wait.
It's very interesting because it's so similar. You know what I mean? Like, I
Oh,
mean, like
shit.
what he's being accused of.
it's because history
doing.
doesn't ever change. It's just
No.
the same shit over
And
and
they,
over.
and you know, just because a president gets through relatively unscathed, let's say minor like they all have scandals, and they're all still doing this stuff.
Nixon further elaborated that I can say categorically that no one in the White House staff, no one in this administration presently employed was involved in this very bizarre incident. And congratulating John Dean on a job well done, and quoting Nixon again.
Read it in his voice, please. I need you. I don't want to hear it in a normal voice.
Oh, I'm sorry. And quoting Nixon again, putting your fingers in the dikes every time that leaks have sprung here and there. Possibly linking Dean to the White House plumbers' activities. Someone in the comments is going to be like, it doesn't sound anything like Nixon.
When he made these statements, like I categorically deny, did he know that they had, or did he really not know at that point and
We'll
think
get
that
to
he? Oh, Michael just got this look like
I do cover that.
Yeah.
you just wait, lady.
You remember John Mitchell's wife, Martha?
Yes.
From like,
Oh, the one with the bodyguard you told
Yeah.
us to remember.
yeah, her bodyguard that I told you to remember. Martha knew James McCord through her old bodyguard, Alfred Baldwin. John realized that his wife was likely to go to the media with her relation to McCord, who was one of the convicted burglars of the DNC. This was enough to link him through association directly to Nixon, and John instructed her new security
Sorry,
Oh,
I'm like making like the connection.
Gotcha.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh,
Sorry.
right.
The Charlie
Like,
meme
this
where all
is-
the red lines are going to everything. This is literally what
But
just
yeah,
happened.
no, because now there's a direct physical like link between.
Yeah, so most of the cover up is just trying to deal with people that could link other people to this. This was enough to link him through association directly to Nixon, because James McCord knows Martha, who's married to John, who is on the committee to re-elect Nixon.
It's like the 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon,
Right.
Nixon style.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's enough that Mitchell is very interested in making sure this stays out of the paper. On a June 1972 phone call with United Press reporter Helen Thomas, Martha said that she was leaving her husband until he resigned from the CRP when the call was abruptly cut off. A week later, Marcia Kramer with the New York Daily News, tracked Martha to a Westchester country club and described her as a beaten woman with visible bruises.
Ooh.
Martha detailed how she was held captive at the Watergate Hotel complex, and her security guard, Steve King, yanked the phone cord from the wall mid-call. Afterwards, she tried escaping from the balcony multiple times and had been beaten and forcefully sedated.
Whoa.
It just says
Yikes.
by a psychiatrist.
Man, I've definitely not heard this part of the
No,
story.
so I don't know who that is. James McCord later admitted that Martha Mitchell had basically been kidnapped to silence her during the cover-up. So John
Oh,
Mitchell had his own wife kidnapped
that's
to
insane
make sure
to
she
keep her
wouldn't say
quiet.
anything about the
Jesus
president.
Christ.
Would you do that to me?
Probably.
Yeah.
You better not say anything.
Well, you'd have to kidnap her and keep her away from the building. And she'd be like, I don't give a fuck. I tell you all what you want to know. Like, where is Maury Povich? I am ready to tell my truth.
That's true.
Oh, that's so funny. So this episode went on a lot longer than we thought it would. So this one is going to be in 2 parts, you guys. If you can't wait a whole week for part 2, be sure to become a Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, You'll not only be supporting the production of this podcast, but you'll also get ad-free content, early episodes, and in this case, you'll get part 2 of Watergate right away. Be sure to DM us on Instagram or send us an email at threesofcrime@gmail.com and let us know what you thought about husband Michael's storytelling of the Watergate incident. For more information and for links to all of our socials, check out threesofcrime.com.